the next, we're going on to our next topic now, which is a transition from what I've been saying, and it's a breakdown of the startup, the African startup ecosystem. And our speakers are Gugu Siso, Valentine Muhamba. Gugu Siso is founder, as I speak you can come through, is founder of Tumeza and CEO. Valentine Muhamba is CEO of .zw, and Simba Mswaka from Tech Hub. Guys, thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedules to talk to us about the African startup ecosystem. I'm going to start by introductions. Starting with Valentine, you can give an introduction of your background and your startup in a minute or two.
Right. My name is Valentine Muhamba. I was up just now, but so great introduction. I am the CEO and founder of .zw. So what we do is we are a data journalist platform that goes into certain markets to find information that startup founders can't find or don't have the money to find. So in a sense, we're a market research department for funders. We have two splits. We have our content division. You can go to .zw.com and you can see the content we put up there. And we have a consultancy division, which, like I said earlier, helps startups with other divisions to build market insights, to build understandings of different markets and business models. We build out businesses, basically. Thank you.
Great.
Hi everyone, my name is Gugu Siso, but please feel free to call me Gugu. I am the CEO of Tumeza. Tumeza is a loan management platform that provides credit to the supply chain sector. We're currently active in South Africa and also have a presence in Kenya and Uganda. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Simba Mswaka. I'm the former director of Tech Hub. Tech Hub is an incubator and a co-working space for startups and small businesses. So how we help them is we help plug them into the ecosystem. We provide them with mentorship. We try and connect them with investors, master classes, and connect them with experts as well. And I'm also a business consultant and a mentor to startups locally and in the region. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for the introductions. So I was looking at the states of investment in the world in startups, venture capital, and the first quarter of this year was low. In the US, it was as much as minus 69% compared to the previous quarter. But Africa had minus 29%, so it was actually the best performing in terms of venture capital in the world. And there are regions, though, like Nigeria, South Africa, they call them the Big Four. So I wanted to pose this first question to Gugu. She has, experience building a startup in different African countries. I wanted to get her thoughts on what we can copy locally into our own startup ecosystem to do better so that, global investors and generally, people around the world can see that there is a vibrant startup ecosystem in Zimbabwe that needs to be supported.
Yo, Tongai. That's an interesting question, looking at the fact that I myself have abandoned Zimbabwe. Just to give you guys a disclaimer, I fought the battle in Zim. It was not worth it, I left. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't have gotten the question. But however, looking at the fact that leaving Zim was not something that I wanted to do, right? Guys, we all have connections within our home countries. You all have networks, people that you went to high school with, people that you went to uni with, people that you met at the mall that are able to open doors for you. Those are the connections that you're able to utilize in order to start as well as scale your businesses. Therefore, starting over in a new place is not something that you want to do willingly. It's the worst experience ever because no one knows you, right? No one can really vouch for you because it's not oh, hey, I know Gugu came from this place, XYZ. I think I can trust her. However, what I would say is, with my experience in starting up startups in different ecosystems, one of the things that I've seen is the willingness in information sharing with what's going on. I like the fact that you'd pointed out that, you'd recommended certain startups within the local ecosystem to, the Google sector, but realistically, how many of us can say that we've been able to share a post or, say, oh, hey, I think Valentine can do this for you within our own communities? We kind of give off the energy of the crab mentality of how dare you want to leave us, right? We're all struggling. It's a bit easier to complain about all the crap that we're going through on a day-to-day basis instead of saying, oh, hey, Tonkai made it out. What about pulling me out as well? It's one of the things that I really envy about the Nigerian ecosystem. The kind of interactions that they have on Twitter alone, the sharing of networks and information, investors on itself, is so important. And then you just try and compare that with what's happening just next door SA, or even just what's happening here in Zim. We're a bit lacking, to be honest. So I'd say the most important part that we can do is just sharing of information before you even start trying to look at, let's say, testing each other's products as, let's say, better users. If Tongai were to say, I know I've tried to use your platform, unfortunately our own things went a bit sideways, right? But to say within this crowd, we've got 50 people, these are potential first-time users as much as you may not buy, but you could just test out the product. Then I could say, hey guys, I've got a new product with 50 users. That's already great traction. But if someone already says, I don't know AfriBlocks, can they do it? That's already you saying that I'm not willing to test it. Therefore, you're not supporting me as a potential startup. So maybe just in conclusion is sharing as well as the willingness to just test out other follow startups' products.
Got you. I like the fact that you mentioned sharing, because there was this time, I think someone from Nigeria reposted our tweet about Data Camp. And I remember thinking maybe something was wrong with my phone. And I called Faith, like, is this happening to you as well? We're having like so much traffic just from that one tweet. I think that day we had like 1,600 registrations just from one person sharing our information. So Nigeria, she was from Nigeria. Nigeria is, they're super active. Kenya as well, because we have about 18,000 freelancers registered right now, and about 8,000 of them are from Nigeria, and we're not even like super operational in that area. So the next question is to Valentine. I know he's the CEO of .zw, which is a publication, a tech publication. So Mr. CEO, we need your help. What can we do better to reach out to you, to reach out to other publications? Basically talk about public relations on how people can know the work that our startup ecosystem and founders are doing.
That's a difficult question, but I'll try my best. So from a publication perspective, I think as startup founders, the one thing, I used to work at TechZim, so the one thing that used to happen when we get a founder who sends us a press release is it's the glossy, beautiful parts of the business. But they forget one important question. What does your actual product or service do? Because as a consumer, and I'm a consumer of a product, when I spoke to Tongai just after they were announced for Techstars, he had a call, actually said, can I have a call with you so I can discuss to you what we actually do as AfriBlocks. That is the difference between a really good descriptive review. I mean, I had reservations, still have reservations about AfriBlocks, but it's better that I got it from Tongai himself, and he allowed me to have that opinion. As opposed to 99.99% of the founders on the market right now, is you get a very well-crafted ChatGPT written press release about what you're trying to achieve using terms like machine learning and whatnot, which mean nothing to the average consumer. You're speaking to people, I think Mr. Mwandera mentioned it, that you have to speak the same language as everybody else. And if you're a technical person, they don't understand. The average user doesn't get what machine learning is, right? So if you describe what you do to the person who's going to tell your story or help tell your story, that's the number one biggest thing you can do. And that's the biggest gripe I have with startup founders in Zimbabwe. Because like Gugu was mentioning, in Nigeria, when you see Tech Cabal, all those guys, it's incredibly well written. I understand what they do. I can actually go on their site and easily start to navigate. When I worked at TechZim, what we actually had to start doing was going on your website as a customer, as a consumer, and reviewing each step, so how to log in, because people will then say in the comments, okay, we saw the website, but how do we log in? How do we use the product? So that communication aspect of, well, it brings the question of, do you actually know your product as well as you think you do? Because if you communicate it poorly to me, the person's going to help tell your story. When it goes further, they're going to understand even less, and there's that dilution of information. Thank you.
Interject about that.
Yep.
Sorry. As not what a violence, Simba. But as much as you're saying that startup founders, should have relationships, I'm guessing that's what you're going to with media companies. Responsiveness that you guys give us is not exactly the best, right? To be honest, I remember trying to interact with, someone within the Zim space. And to be honest, I got about a product that we just launched, and we had pretty good metrics. It was a partnership with the UNDP. We only finally got interest. I think it was about a financial quarter later. It's done. I've moved on. So now it's the whole thing where it's establishing relationships with this particular demographic does not seem to be something that the current media is interested in. So I'd say maybe aside from that part, what about just creating basic relationships so that Tongai can call, and when he calls, he's sure that you're actually going to post what you said you would when you said you would.
So that's a really good point. What I've noticed with the media space in Zim, particularly the old guard, and I'm talking about your Zim papers and etc., they don't necessarily care about what you do.
Yep.
They don't.
They don't. That's true.
So you have to find niches in the tech space. I mean, we had interaction at TechZim when you called me about, was it the Telecel ASIP, when you guys had made it? And we had a call, right? Was I not receptive to your call?
Another conversation. I'm talking about the UNTV one, but it's fine.
No.
But it's fine. If it wasn't you, now that's the thing, right?
So those are the best practices we've tried to put across into the tech media space. To say, if you see a founder calling you, they literally want to tell you the story. They want to give you the exclusive, right? They want to tell you from their company perspective. And you need to build that relationship with the founder, so they understand that you're going to carry their message in the same way you got it, albeit with your reservations and comments.
Just to add, one thing that I noticed we sometimes don't appreciate or take for granted is networking. So after this event, when we have our lunch, I'm pretty sure someone is going to leave before talking to anyone. So like, you're already here, talk to people, because when you do that, now you have that relationship to call someone. I think it's something that's very useful for founders, because now when you need to reach out to someone, I'm not saying it's right to not get a response because you don't know someone from Daily News or Herald. Anyway, moving on. Last year, I want to talk to point this question to Simba, since he's had experience in tech hubs. Last year, I think I was in the US for the Black Blockchain Summit, and we have a membership for a tech hub there. So they have locations across the United States. We pay, I think, $29 a month. But what they allow you to do is, if you're ever in Washington, D.C., and they have a location there, you can go there and get work done. And at that time, I also went to San Francisco, and they have another location there. I just went there, produced my card, and was able to work as well. So that's a model that I thought was interesting, because it's a hub that is different locations, but you use the same membership to access them. So my question to Simba is, what are some of the ways that we can improve our tech hub ecosystem? Because tech hubs are super important. They create networks, they create relationships, and they help founders meet the right people.
Okay, let me start by agreeing with Gugu. I've reached out to Valentine, and he hasn't shown me love, so I understand it. You're not the only one. With regards to tech hubs, they play such an important part of the entire ecosystem. That's literally where startups and these great ideas are manifested and become the unicorns and the decacons and whatever you want to call them. Giraffes, yes. That's where they start, in these hubs and these innovation labs. So the problem that we have locally is that innovation is this sexy term that everyone wants to get on board with, but they don't actually understand it. So you find that corporates like to hear about it, but they're not investing in the space. And then those that do invest have their own agendas because they're similar to funders. The funders that come from the US, the UK, they have their own agenda. They're the tail wagging the dog. They don't want you to fund something that will help what you think is the actual problem in Africa. What they think is the problem is what they are going to fund, you see. So with the hubs that we have, the hubs are incapacitated. They don't have enough money. There's very little. The rate of failure of startups is 90%. So what we actually need is the corporates to get on board and say, let's give guys like Tongai, myself, maybe Valentine, Gugu, Takunda, guys who've been in the space, who've dealt with funders, who've dealt with founders, who understand what exactly are the problems, and then you build from there. Because if it's a bank like, let's say, FBC or Stanbic wants someone to take a loan and pay back interest, in this economy, it's not going to work. We need patient capital that can grow over time. And that's how we can then build these hubs and create these ecosystems that produce great entrepreneurs and actual tech businesses that can then expand across the region. Yeah.
I think you've introduced something that's super important, which is funding. My question is to Gugu, but I'll speak as a founder. Raising capital is difficult. It's hard. You basically reach a point where you should be used to no's because you're going to get a lot of them. So my question to Gugu is, what other methods can we use instead of venture capital? Why we wait? Why we create those pipelines, those relationships to eventually get venture capital? What other methods can we use as founders?
Great question. I just want to put a disclaimer that I do not think that venture capital is the answer for everyone else's financing problem. We all don't need rockstar VC firms on our cap table, As Simba had mentioned, that sometimes they come with their own unique set of problems that are not exactly the answer for what you are facing. So maybe just to give you guys a bit of perspective of my own founder journey, I am a 3X founder, had my very first startup in Namibia within the retail tech space, did something very stupid, which was raising venture capital from a private equity firm, gave away 49% of the business because they gave us a couple of million. But what you don't realize is that it comes with signing away rights for your company. Right? So it's not VC, it's PE. You think PE is a bit more cash sensitive. They understand that cash in, cash out, but they also have their own weird set of issues. Got kicked out of the company in 2017, went through some crap, and then came back here 2018 to start the new company. New company, what I did, VC was not understanding logistics in Zimbabwe. One, I think there was a gentleman that the gentleman there, sorry, your name has escaped me. You're saying that the market is not sexy, right? 14 million people is not exactly a demographic that makes sense. Southern Africa, maybe, with the 300 billion, maybe. So couldn't raise any VC, ended up going through a crap load of accelerators. And I think in Africa, we're now in the space where a lot of founders are now caught in this vicious cycle of going through a lot of accelerators in order to get 10K, 50K, 30K here. It's really, really, really disheartening because you're going through a 6-month accelerator program in order to get 30K. And you're only going to get the 30K after you've gone through that program. Can you imagine what 6 months can do to your product pipeline? If Tongai and I were in competition, Tongai right now, with 50K in hand and me with 30K in hand 6 months later, he'll be far, far, far beyond me, right? We can't even talk the same language. So that's an option that's there, depending on what particular trajectory you are in the startup journey. If you're early stage, I recommend that you take it. But if you're later stage and you need money right now, I would say maybe look at something else. The other option that we've also been really getting into is grant funding, free money. There are other options such as the Google for Black Founders Funds, but other aid organizations that are now focusing within the startup space or other, let's say if they are saying, oh, we want to fund environmental startups doing XYZ, we'll give them 100K. If you're an environmental startup, maybe just tailor your thing to make sure that you qualify for that. Get your 100K and move on with your life. I know that M&E is not always there. They're not going to monitor you. As long as you make them look good and say, powered by XYZ agency, they'll give you the money. You can move on with your life, right? I've done that quite a lot. The other one, hey, they're happy with what we're doing, so please don't go out there spreading stories about Timeza. The other one, I think, Simba, you had mentioned the part about commercial partnerships. So what we are now also doing is just straight up getting contracts and trying to finance them straight up. So as I was saying, we provide credit to the logistics sector. I do not necessarily need VC to expand, right? The core product is me borrowing you money. I don't need a fancy interface in order to do that. Fancy interface with no money means nothing. So what we're now doing is getting the money to loan out. We've currently surpassed $1 million in disbursements. Get the money to loan out and then build the tech after the fact. Yeah. So it's me continuing without having to go through all this crap of raising money.
Gotcha. I think you talked about something that I think is super helpful, that you don't necessarily need to build a fancy product.
Can I just add something about fundraising for a startup? I'm sure everyone is familiar with Tinder, right? The dating app. Yeah. So imagine the VC or the funder, they're looking at these startups and they just swipe left. So you need to have a match between the two of you. The VC is looking for certain metrics and you are looking for, so you're saying, I'm looking for casual, saying long term, swipe left. So when you get that match, you're both looking for long term, and you go swipe right, then you start chatting, then you move to WhatsApp or email, and then you progress, and you go down that journey until you eventually get married and you get funded. So that's what it is. There's so many startups competing for that one VC or private equity person.
Yeah, they actually do say getting an investor is like getting into marriage, because this person is giving you 200K, 500,000. You're going to have a long-term relationship with them. They need to see a return on that money. So that's why it's also important to not just accept any money. You need to know who this person is. Are they really, here to support you? Otherwise, you're going to have problems in the future. Another way that I saw that is super helpful in building startups is bootstrapping. It's hard. I know an example of Calendly, which I always mention. The guy, I think he received 500,000 in funding, and then he built Calendly for 7 straight years without accepting any external money, because he said, I just gave up. But he was getting revenue, using that revenue to grow the business, pay his employees, until I think about in 2020, he received about 300 million in funding, and his company is now, a unicorn. So bootstrapping is difficult. It would take time. I don't think I have 7 years, but that's another way that you can use to raise. Some of my final questions to Valentine is around is the information there? You are in the media space. Is the information there? Where can people go to get this information about raising? Who has raised? How did they raise? Things like that.
Okay, the information is there. I'll start with what you're talking about invest startup match. So the biggest issue with startups I've seen, at least the startups I've sat on these investor meets, is that, again, the communication of what they actually do and the distilling of their operations. So luckily, when I spoke to Tongai, he gave me a very in-depth understanding of what the operations of AfriBlocks looks like, one of the first initial conversations we had. So if I was an investor in that room, I understood what I was getting into bed with, right? And also, don't take any money is a really, 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 really important thing. Some money comes with some serious strings attached. Yeah. So when it comes to the information about who's raising what and how, Britta Bridges, really great platform that you can get all these reports from about who's raised how much and whatnot. What's the name? Disrupt Africa does also a lot of information about who raised which money in which territories. Tech Up Ultras as well. I mean, they give you those informationals on their Twitter about who raised X amount of money. To be fair, and I'll be honest, my opinion of the monies raised, we know about the big four, right?
Yeah.
The big four is the big four on paper. That's the disclosed funds. Unfortunately, a lot of money is being made in the private equity merger and acquisition space. If you are not looking at funding besides the VC side, like what Gugu was mentioning, there's so many facets to funding. It's not just bootstrapping, it's friends and family rounds. The market for undisclosed in Africa, I would hazard a guess, probably bigger than what we get from VCs. But it's just counting that down, and we don't have the numbers, so the information is not available. However, your perception about funding needs to change. If you see that Afribox got $2 million from whoever, good for them. Your $2 million is not going to come in the same way. Neither must you compare that this is the benchmark of what's possible through traditional funding rounds, because remember, these companies that announce these things also have ulterior motives about what they're bringing up.
Yeah.
They typically leave a lot of markets out. I was looking at an Excel sheet about all the startups that were funded in Africa in 2022. And I knew of disclosed funding that didn't come from Zim.
Yeah.
I knew startups that had disclosed money. I think it's 2021 when you guys got the money from Google for Founders Fund, wasn't there. So again, the information you're getting online, pinch of salt. Regardless if they say they give you a beautiful infographic and whatever, information is typically leaning towards some sort of agenda. So be very careful about where you get your information from and compare your sources. Because Tongai might give a press release to Disrupt Africa, say they got 100,000. And then my friends with the back at Texan will say over 100,000. So compare information and see the consistency, because that then skews the figures. We might say the big four wins, but the M&A space in South Africa, like I was talking to Simba a few days ago, is ridiculous. We are not there. Nigeria might not be making VC money in the way the M&A space in South Africa is moving. I mean, if we had time, Gugu would tell you about how Imperial Logistics is moving mad in these streets. Funding is very subjective. As much as it's like money in the bank, it's how you see the information is tailored to who's writing it and for what reason.
Got you. I think the interesting piece you mentioned is about South Africa, because I've seen like at least 5 acquisitions of companies that I didn't even know. And I'm super active, maybe not, in the startup space. But, it's very important to know that the information out there is not necessarily all the information. With that being said, this has been a great conversation. And, after this, we're going to have a networking session. Talk to any of these guys, talk to me as well, if you have any questions. For now, we're moving on to the next panel.